Welcome to Feeding the Family with Dr. Kristen, where we help you navigate the challenges of feeding your family and learn about the role food plays in our health and relationships. Feeding and food relationships can be stressful, confusing, and even destructive. I'm Kristen Saxena, a pediatrician and mother of 4 who's been researching and sharing what I've learned about feeding for over 10 years. In this podcast, I'll share my experience and expertise to help our kids and ourselves with everyday survival tips for real parents. This podcast is about progress, not perfection. So let's get started. Welcome back to Feeding the Family with Dr. Kristen. I'm your host, Kristen Saxena. Make sure and hit that subscribe button on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're getting your podcasts so you don't miss an episode. On today's episode, we're joined by my good friend, Ashli Brehm. Ashli was the author of a very popular blog entitled Baby on the Brehm, where she talked about her experience raising 3 boys that started out as angry, colicky babies, and then went on to talk about her experience being diagnosed with breast cancer. Today, she's cancer-free and joining us to talk about the life lessons that she learned through her journey through motherhood and cancer. We also talk a little bit about what we're grateful for this year and our favorite dishes to eat on Thanksgiving. Welcome to the show, Ashli.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Ashli Brehm, you are one of my dearest friends.
You're also one of my dearest friends.
Definitely.
So we don't usually talk with the microphone.
We don't,
us, but
I like it.
It's fine.
Okay. So I have known you like 12-ish years. So I first met Ashli when I went to a New Year's Eve party with some mutual friends of ours. We came to a party at your house. So I'd have to say New Year's Eve is probably not like when I'm in my best form, but I feel like we became
Nor
fast
any
friends.
of us.
Because we both had little babies at that time. So you were like one of the few people I kind of met in my circle that had a baby. And I feel like when you go out for what had to have been maybe the second New Year's Eve I had celebrated since having a baby, it's kind of a big deal.
Yes, it's huge. Everybody else, like they can do that on any Tuesday or Thursday. And, we're like planning for it for weeks. So yes.
It was wonderful.
It was awesome. And I do remember that you and your husband were looking to move back to Nebraska, and we talked about houses, and yeah, it was just, you're an easy person to like. So
well, thank you. Well, same here. So I feel like we started when we moved back, started kind of hanging in the same circle. And I have to say, I've been in love with you really since that New Year's Eve party.
Well, agreed. It's a mutual admiration club or whatever they call that. So no.
But can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Because I always joke that now, like I've called you my most famous friend, but you have had, you've just kind of had an interesting route. So can you tell me just a little bit about your life, or tell our listeners? I know.
Yeah. I don't find myself that interesting, but I do apprete that from Kristen.
And that's one of the things I love about you is that you just are downplay everything.
Oh, gosh. Well, my husband and I are both from Nebraska. We met in college at the university, and I always joke that like he was the first guy that I really dated, and within like 2 weeks of meeting him, I was seriously like, and we're getting married. So that worked out great because we're still married, and we've been married for about 17 years, I guess, this year. And there's been nothing like, I always say there's nothing like really remarkable. Our life is very ordinary and normal, like Midwestern couple, both came from what I would say like families that were both, 2-parent homes in the Midwest in the 80s and 90s, both have siblings. We're both youngest kids, which is not supposed to work, but I think it does. But we had just some weird things, like each of our boys were born early. When I was 17, I was diagnosed with chronic hypertension. And for those who aren't aware, there's like different types of high blood pressure that affect pregnancy in different ways. And for me, they kind of knew going into pregnancies that it would be difficult for my body to, I would just say like help the baby thrive throughout the pregnancy. So I was really closely followed through through my pregnancies. And then when the baby kind of stopped growing in me, they'd say, okay, it's time to get it out. And so our oldest, Barrett, was born just 4 weeks early. They induced me, but he was 4 pounds, 9 ounces. And then our second, Jonah, who's 2.5 years between the two, was kind of same song, same verse, because he was born at 36 weeks induced, and he came out, he was our biggest baby at 4 pounds, 11 ounces.
Dang.
I know, right? Tipping the scales, right? And then our third son, Harrison, they induced me at 32 weeks with him. Just again, my blood pressure was just skyrocketing and they couldn't control it. And I was super lucky. He was perfectly healthy. He was just tiny. He was 3 pounds. So we stayed in the NICU with him. That was all just crazy. I did not enjoy having infants.
Right. So, well, I think that brings to, so you stayed home with your kids. So
I did.
And what you did during that time, besides taking care of all these babies, is you had started a blog. Mm-hmm. And did you start it when Barrett was born? Yes. Is that right?
I joke that I was like a mommy blogger before that, in my opinion, before like in the Midwest at least, it was really a thing. And I don't mean I'm like a trendsetter. It was, I was pregnant and we had a bunch of friends that were living in other places and family. And I said to Adam, I think it'd be fun to blog. We should do it together. Mm-hmm. So that's how it started. And I had the idea going to work one day and I thought it was genius. I thought I was the like punniest person that had ever happened. I'm not kidding. I came home and I said to Adam, okay, I've got the name of the blog. And I was like 8 weeks pregnant or whatever with my first. And he said, okay. And I said, Baby on the Brehm. Because our last name is pronounced Brehm.
Yeah.
But if you look at our last name,
Brehm. Yeah.
It's Brehm. Right. Everybody says Brehm. Like, and I say it's like the Canada A, EHA.
Brehm.
I'm like, Brehm. And but then, so I started this blog and it was on Blogger. So at the time it was just like whatever.blogspot.com, and when I started it, even my parents and Adam's parents would say like, well, the next time that you write one of those things, why don't you send us where to go to find that? And I'm like, no, it's like all on one, like place. It's like the actual web address. I mean, trying to explain it to people.
We were all just getting used to the internet.
Right. But it's just so funny because that was 2008. So the fact that everything has changed that much. I mean, I guess that makes it sound like I'm one of those old people that's like, 10 years ago is 1990. But,
right. Totally.
But yeah, so I started blogging and then I just kind of kept blogging all through it.
It took off, and we can talk about later when it probably really took off. But it was pretty popular, I would say, even early in its stages. But like I remember like reading your blogs way back in the day. So like you said, we had kids around the same time, and you were my good friend, so I just loved it. And I just always loved how real about things you were. And like you said, you had these little babies, and that was not like your favorite stage of child rearing. And so I feel like everyone has their challenges.
I like finally think I'm over the guilt of that. But like for a while being around people who love the infant stage, I did feel really bad because I'd be like, oh, the little aliens, the devils, and I feel bad about that. But
well, you shouldn't.
Right. I don't anymore. I'm okay with it.
You had small, colicky babies.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Or what did you say? Little angry babies.
Little angry babies. Yeah.
And I feel like that was also one of the times, like I was a pediatrician at the time, so I would take care of parents that had colicky babies, but I don't think I ever understood like what an evening with a colicky baby was until you guys brought, maybe it was Jonah over time. And I remember like thinking, yeah, of course, like in the evening, babies get fussy. And I knew, I didn't really have colicky babies, but I was like, oh, yeah, that's super
Everybody has
frustrating.
like the witching hour. Or whatever,
the little
right?
witching hour. And they're like just grumpy for no reason. And you're like, oh, that's so hard. And then you guys brought Jonah over, and I was like, Jesus Christ. I was like, oh my God. And you guys are just smiling, like going on with life. And we were like, oh my God. So you really contributed to my education, because I was like, oh yeah, I see why people lose it.
That's okay. And it should be told that I'm mildly obsessed with your podcast, obviously. Like, I mean, that I text you like in the middle of listening to an episode, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this quote. I love this quote. But there was the very first episode, and you said the best thing. You said, before becoming a pediatrician, I thought I knew everything there was to know about babies. And then I had babies, and I realized I didn't know anything, basically. That's what you said. And I remember hearing that from you. And again, I already think you're brilliant, but I was just like, yes. I mean, don't we all have that moment as parents, or whatever role we're playing in a kid's life? Maybe not a parent. Maybe it's a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or a friend, a neighbor, where you see somebody else's child, and then you realize, oh, wait. Every kid is different.
Right.
Oh, okay. So like, that's wild. But I mean, we're all different.
Well, I think that's just it. Like, you have to, it's so hard if you don't live in it or have like the firsthand experience. And we all go into parenthood with these preconceived notions about how it will be, how our children will be, how we will be. And at least for me, none of that really has played out as I thought it would, for good and bad. Like, better and worse for sure. But I just think you can never know until you know.
Well, and what I appreciated about when, having a friend who was a pediatrician and had seen babies, I appreciated seeing too how laid back you were with your kids. So that also kind of helped me, because I think sometimes as a new mom, like for my kids, I was doing this whole MSPI diet. I feel like sometimes people say this is a Midwestern thing. Would you agree with that?
Well, obviously I only ever lived and doctored in the Midwest, but I had heard the same thing too. And I do think it's something that is overdiagnosed, because I think, and I think especially back when our kids were little, it was kind of like, oh, your baby's fussy or poops a lot or pretty much anything. It would be like, oh, well, let's try this exclusion diet. Right. And so my oldest actually ended up having just a milk protein intolerance. Oh. And I only found out about it. I remember taking him to his first pediatrician appointment, and we'd had no problems. Or it wasn't his first. It was probably his 2-month checkup. I don't remember exactly. But we're in the doctor's office. I'm waiting for the doctor. Of course, he takes a giant poop, because that's what happens while you're like. And I also remember, I just have to tell you this story. It's totally unrelated.
No, I want to hear it.
I remember taking him, I think it was one of his first doctor's appointments. And of course, I was still, you're very anxious, and I had put all this pressure on myself. I'm a pediatrician, right? Like, I should be able to mom like a rock star. But of course, it's a shit show.
Yeah, you'd never had your own human to actually,
no. And I was just like, oh my God. So I remember the other thing too that you do when you have a first baby is you dress them like, little men, and it's all about the outfits, and it's so much fun.
My third was wearing we called him Hugh Hefner, because all he wore was footy pajamas for the first year of his life. And then after that, that's all he wants to do is wear pajamas.
But the first one's bow tie to everything, right? To Target. So I was like, you all day. This is the big event. We're taking you to your first appointment. I have the little perfect outfit. I have him all dressed, and I'm just going to change his diaper at one time before, which of course he proceeds to pee all over said outfit into his ear. Like he's here, I actually see his like ear fill with urine, right? And I'm like horrified. We are going to be late. And of course I have to
Looks like he's got an ear infection.
Yeah, he's got like an ear
fluid.
urine, and this adorable outfit I changed him into is just soaked, right? And I'm like, oh my God. So I'm like frantically trying to dry out his ear and like, you know, like I'm the worst mom ever and we're going to be late and this is terrible. So that's just the precursor to how we arrived. So I'm sure we arrived late, and my pediatrician was actually like he was kind of one of my teachers. So that was the clinic where I worked as a resident.
Oh, that's even more pressure.
Right. So I was like really wanting to impress him with my parenting skills. So we get there, and of course then he like poops himself. And so I open up the diaper, and it's like full of blood and mucus.
Oh, I was going to say mucus, like stringy.
Yeah.
Looks like snot.
Yeah. And so
Yes.
he's like, we come in, and it's the first time this has happened. And I'm like, holy crap, right? And so he's like, any concerns? And I'm like, just this, like that just happened, right? And this guy is just like, you need to calm down. But so that is usually what I would use as a pretty clear sign that there's likely something in. And I was breastfeeding at the time. And so he was like, okay, this is a pretty good sign that he's got MSPI. And so he was going to start me on like Nutramigen or some, you're very familiar with all these, kind of an elemental or a hydrolyzed formula. So the other thing about me, I think at the time too, is I was going to do my own thing, right? So I was like, I don't know about that.
Then that's different from now, we think.
You never know. Okay, so that's just a personality trait. I do not make a very good patient. We'll just put it that way.
I think that's all right.
It is.
I mean, I like it, again, as a friend, because you're the doctor, but you're saying like, I'm also going to use my own instincts.
Yes. So what ended up happening, so I'm a resident, first time mom, breastfeeding, and breastfeeding was not ever easy for me, right? So some people, I would be in awe of these people with these freezers full of milk, and that's just never been me. But of course, I was still like pushing myself to breastfeed because, of course, that was the right thing to do.
As we are supposed to.
So, but then you take your life that you're already struggling, and then you're not allowed to eat anything.
Well, and you're a resident, so
Yeah.
How many hours are you working? You're
I
on
was
your
working
feet,
like 80 hours a week. I mean, it was terrible. So yes. So I ended up like realizing, so I was like, well, I'm just going to see if because we were supplementing with formula. And also like the hydrolyzed formulas are really expensive.
Yeah.
So, and you know, we're just poor residents. So
Right.
I was like, bought the soy formula just to see how it goes, and ended up just only eliminating dairy from my diet, because also soy is really hard because it's in like, you don't realize that soy is in all the foods we eat.
Everything.
Until you're looking and you're like, are you kidding me? Like,
But you could have you couldn't have soy protein, but you could have soy lecithin. Like there were like all these little caveats to like, this is okay, but this isn't, or whatever.
Totally. So, I mean, I guess my point is not necessarily that you shouldn't listen to your doctor, because you should. And I'm not suggesting everybody.
No.
But going back to your point, that I think that it made me, again, the experience of that made me more sensitive to not just throw out that diagnosis, because that becomes a very real hurdle and challenge for parents.
Right.
Like,
and
a lot.
Similar, you hit the nail on the head. The cost of I think EllaCare was the one that they had recommended for us. And so I'll say, because our boys were born at the size they were, not necessarily the gestation, but the size, our pediatrician was phenomenal, and I love her to this day. I mean, again, we were in for weight checks twice a week, every week for the first, I think, probably 6 weeks. We had a scale at home to weigh, between feedings, things that like, again, I understand why we had to do it, but I also, those are all make you obsessed with every pound, every ounce, not even a pound. A pound was thrilling. Like every ounce you're trying to, and I was trying to sustain the babies with my breast milk, because in a good way, my mom is a huge proponent of breastfeeding. She had breastfed all three of us kids in the 80s, which some people say is kind of rare. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that was like the day and age of
like formula, right?
Like, what an awesome
And she
option.
always says, like, I wasn't going to breastfeed. But then she did, and she liked it and felt like it was easy. I wasn't, like, breastfed till I was older. It was just the first year or whatever, and then she was done. But I decided, okay, I'm going to breastfeed the boys. I'm going to do my best. But the way that it worked is we would, and I know a lot of moms go through this, so I almost hate talking about it because I feel like I'm saying, well, mine was so much harder. But it wasn't. It was just, this was the devil we knew was I would, we needed to feed him every 2 hours. And if you've ever had a baby around, you know that feeding every 2 hours means that you start the feeding from the time that you began the last feeding, not the time you ended the last feeding.
Right.
So if they feed, and again, with our first, it was, we didn't know really yet that, we found out later with our third that the longer that you're feeding a preemie, they can start to lose weight eating because it's so much work for them.
Yeah, they burn a lot of calories.
Yeah. So like it would be, okay, you're definitely going to feed them at least for 20 or 30 minutes. And then after that, you're going to pump. And you're going to pump so that way you have milk to supplement them when you need it, but also so that you keep your production up because they're small and they're not eating as much as they need to. So it'd be do that, then pump for 20 minutes, and then we'd wash all the pump parts. And during the time, and because the baby was refluxy and spitty and everything and crabby, Adam, my husband, would do what we called the nighttime dance or the daytime dance when he was home. I mean, when I had the boys, Adam went back to work, 5 days after we had him.
Right.
I remember I was like, what the actual hell has happened?
You're just going to leave me alone with this thing?
I'm like, excuse me? So he ended up keeping him upright because we didn't want him to spit. So it was like this obsession with everything that had to do with his weight. Everything that went into my body, I was terrified about. I had such horrible postpartum anxiety. At the time, I don't think I knew postpartum anxiety was a thing. I had heard of postpartum depression, which I would be happy to have. I went into my 6-week appointment and I said, I think like I need something. I think I'm not myself. Yeah. And my midwife said, well, here's this like test you can do or whatever. And I did the test and she's like, well, you don't seem to want to not be with your baby. You don't seem to want to hurt your baby. There was all these things, I guess, that maybe are like the red flags of postpartum depression. And I didn't have those, but I was so terrified to leave him and that I wasn't sustaining him right. I was so worried about if I would eat something. I read every label. So what they ended up having me do was take out all dairy, soy, corn, wheat, what was that, gluten, and I was for a while just eating like turkey and green beans. And I don't really like either of those things on a daily basis. Yeah. So, the feeding of the family at that point was literally like whatever I ate was going into him. And that was my first introduction to I can never make fun of another parent who doesn't want their kid to have this or have this because I was obsessed.
Well, and I think that that's a huge point because then we wonder why we obsess about food and feeding our kids and all those things later in life when from day one, especially if you've been told, and it could very well be very important and true at that stage of their life, but at what point do we let go? If you've already entered that mindset and being so aware, then you wonder, why do people get so obsessed with these things? And it's like, well, we were already conditioned from day one. Right. And we haven't been able to cut ties with that way of thinking.
The reason we did not do formula was primarily because we knew it would be $500 to $700 a month for formula, and I was staying home. And it was not something we could afford. Could we have I've heard of people saying we took out a loan, we took out a second mortgage or whatever to pay for formula. I think that's a really unfortunate part of our society is even moms who, again, fed is best, right? And so it's even moms who want to give kids formula don't always have access to that formula. Yeah. And so they're left with breast milk, but maybe like you said, maybe it doesn't come easy to them. Maybe they, like me, have a situation where they're saying like, this is not actually the best thing for this baby's tummy. And so it's the feeding. I have found through you and talking about nutrition and feeding and such with kids, and then my sister-in-law does a lot with eating disorders and body image, and I think through both of you, I've really formed how I feel about how I talk about food and eating and health of kids and how they move their bodies and everything, because I just think the messages, by and large, like you said, from the moment you have that baby and you're at the hospital, I just think we go home with messages that food needs to be something that is the number one priority, period. And so it takes any joy out of it at the beginning.
Yeah, I think it's pretty stressful.
Yeah.
So I want to revisit what you just said.
Sorry.
But no, but I do want to kind of
probably on a million tangents. I apologize.
No, it's amazing. I think it's such good information, and I appreciate you sharing. But I want to. So we were talking about the blog, and I kind of alluded a little bit about how it got more popular in later years.
Right.
So I would be remiss without mentioning that 5 years ago?
It's been 6 years since diagnosis.
6 years ago, you were diagnosed with breast cancer.
Yes.
So can you talk to me a little bit about how that went and
just
the story behind that?
Well, I do think, I don't know if this will make the cut, but I do think it needs to be stated that another very special tie that I share with Kristen is that because of meeting Kristen and her husband, I do believe that I get to say here today.
That feels like a stretch, but not.
Well, a lot of forces at work, I guess, that all have played in very well together. But I mentioned that I had chronic hypertension since I was 17. And so when I met your husband, who at the time was practicing cardiology, he said, you need somebody who's really going to do a good job of making sure that your preventative heart health is very good. But I don't think that you need to pay to go see a cardiologist. You should see my mom. She has a family practice in town. And so at that point, I had bounced around between some internal medicine guys here in Omaha and hadn't found one that I really clicked with. I mean, again, walking in, I had every test done. Yes, like I tried the DASH diet for anybody else. I tried all the stuff to try to get my blood pressure to be normal, but it just wasn't. I remember my first reading that was high was 150/110, and I was 17 years old. And that's what my genetics kind of are. So I started seeing Dr. Saxena, and after I had seen her for a few years, she saw me through a couple babies. She saw me through a very difficult lost pregnancy time. And so I had been seeing her, and I felt like things were really good. I actually said, I felt like I was finally getting to the point in my life where, okay, I didn't have these angry babies anymore. We were pretty happy with where our family situation had landed with 3 boys and 5 years, I guess, 6 years. And this doctor, briefly when I lived in Austin, had said to me, like, because of your blood pressure, you should probably try to not be 30 when you're starting to have kids. You should probably think about having your kids when you're in your late 20s at least, maybe early 20s. And so that set into motion that we had the boys. We were very blessed to have them when we did. And then I was seeing Dr. Saxena. I went into her in late August of 2015, and I had my 2 youngest, Jonah and Harrison, with me. And I said, I have getting my blood pressure checked, but also I found this lump in my breast. And
I actually remember, I don't know if you do, we were at your house, and I remember you showed that to us. Well, me, I guess you didn't like show it to my husband, but I don't want to put you out there as like flashing people. At
that wouldn't be shocking. So
but I remember that too. You were like, here, feel this. Does this feel weird or whatever. And I remember actually being like, I mean, it does, but it's probably not
probably
cancer.
nothing.
You know, wasn't just saying that to like reassure you. It was like,
No.
well, you don't have any family history, you know, you're very young, so don't freak out. Like, go to my mother-in-law and get it checked out. But I remember later being like, well, I was wrong, you know?
No, but I remember one of the first things I did too was I texted you and 3 other moms that are my mom friends. And I said, did anybody have anything weird like in their breast after breastfeeding? You know, I had weaned in April of that year, and then it was August. And so I just remember thinking like, and I can also recall that I thought it was a clogged duct.
Well, I thought that too, because I was like, oh, I had those.
Yeah, I joked that there was probably just cottage cheese left in there. Like, it's probably like curds and whey by this point. And so when I went in, I laid down and she did the exam. And what's so awesome, and why I say she like saved my life and what she did, how she did right by me, is that because I was 33, because I had no family history of breast cancer, I was working out every day. I had these 3 kids, but I was very active. I was a normal, I think I probably weighed like 130 pounds or something. And by all accounts, there was no reason other than this lump that she should have thought it could be cancer. And in our culture, in our society right now with healthcare, and this is not like any sort of statement, it's just saying the way that it goes is there are a lot of things you have to jump through a lot of hoops sometimes to get the test that you need or whatever. I have been so fortunate because I have not had a shortage of access to healthcare. When I had my babies, I had 3 preemies. My insurance covered all of it. I was able to have access to great, high-risk docs to help me get from pregnancy, seeing the pregnancy, yes, you're pregnant on the stick, to you're having the baby and we're all good. We had a NICU stay that was covered. So we've been so fortunate with that. And then to add on to that, I've had Sandia Saxena who said, yeah, we're going to get a mammogram.
Yeah.
So that day, she not only did she say, we're going to get you a mammogram, it was the Friday before Labor Day of 2015. And that afternoon, I had my mammogram. She came up for that, or she came in for that as well, and then also came in as they did an ultrasound, and they looked at my right breast, and they said, this one looks like a snowstorm. This one does not. One of these things is not like the other. And I think at about 3.5 weeks later, I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer.
So PSA 2, I think, is to say, like, to take those things seriously when you find them, because I think, again, like, a lot of us will be like, well, I don't have any risk factors. I'm fine. I'm sure it's nothing.
And I think, too, my kids were 6, 4, and 2. And so, like I said, I was so concerned with their checkups and what they were doing. I was lucky that I had a good doctor, because I had the doctor partially because I had this other pre-existing health condition, right, that had nothing to do with cancer. But because I had that doctor and I had established a relationship with her, she also knew my body. And she knew what had been normal and what hadn't. And she knew me and my, I don't even know what you want to call it, crazy level of like, she knew when I came in that I was concerned, And so even if she hadn't been that concerned, she still treated me for the mental part of it too.
Sure.
So that's what I appreciate, is she's finding a doctor who not only knows like what your body's doing, but is saying, even if the body ends up being okay, if your mind's not okay about it, then your body's not okay about it.
And that's a whole nother show, Ashley.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think, that also brings to mind as like, I mean, we're certainly getting older, but like even as a younger person, I encourage everybody, it can be hard to actually find a doctor or a medical home where you feel is a good fit for you.
Yes.
But when you don't want to be doing that is when you're in the thick of things.
I agree.
So I really encourage people to get someone, get a medical home, get a physician, like my mother-in-law, or somebody that you feel like gets you, knows you, listens to you, and like you said, takes in the whole you.
Yes.
Mental, physical, all of it. Because like when you would be diagnosed, that would not be the time in your life to be trying to find that person. It makes a huge difference.
Well, and I think you said it so perfectly, like finding a medical home for your earthly home, because this is the only one, your body, this is it. Like if this thing gives out, that's it. That's how that goes. So yeah, I mean, so that took my life in a totally different direction than we were thinking it would go. I said it was like that whole meme a few years ago that was like, when life goes the way you didn't think, or when it goes the way things don't go the way you think they should go, I just yell plot twist and move on, like, ooh, something different. So yeah, I started chemo in October of 2015. And then chemo was interesting.
Yeah.
So we did that. And yes, people will sometimes say, so is this like the type of cancer where you lose your hair? Chemo is the thing that makes you lose your hair. So yes, this was. It was that type of cancer.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I don't know. The cancer thing was a wild ride. And you're right. I mean, that's kind of when I had kept blogging. I had been blogging all the way from Barrett's birth and all the way through that. So, but I'm so glad I had been, because it was definitely like a therapy for me.
Well, and I think I always have loved you since I met you, but to me that was like one of the hugest. It was just, I just was so in awe of you because no, like I always said, I mean, I've never, that's a horrible situation, right? Like you're young, you've got cancer, you've got this family you're trying to take care of. It didn't even happen to me. But like you use that platform to tell your story the whole way through, like while you were going through it, the good, the bad, all of it. And you put it out there for people. And that is very rare. And I would follow you on your blog, and the responses you would get from people going, I mean, that to me is when it really got popular, because it filled such a void and a need for people going through this same, what can be a very isolating and like scary, lonely situation. And so I was just in awe of you, because I just thought, what an incredible service. And to do that, it had to be the worst time of life. So I always called you my ultimate like lemons to lemonade person, because it was incredible.
Well, and I think it's so interesting every time I hear, not every time, I hear that all the time. And so, no, but when, you've said nice, very kind things like that before, and there have been others who have said like, how could, that's brave or whatever. And it was honestly so selfish, because for me, I joked, I said it was like, what does Liz Lemon say? Like high five and 1,000 angels every day or whatever. It felt like in this time of life that was so hard, or could be so hard, I got to see all this goodness from people. And not only did I see, like, not only were my friends like you guys and my tight family, as I call you people, just went above and beyond over and over and over again. I say, I don't know how, there will never be a day that I will repay all of you for just the compassion that you showed my family, and the way that you all cared for me, and the way you cared for my kids. And I think that's the thing, right? As a mom, like the biggest thing for me was not to like make my kids not see that it's hard, but to make them see that in all of the mess, there's still beauty, and we got to see the real like purity and beauty of the human spirit, because everybody was so kind. Like, and that's also, I hate to call it, it's not a gift, and I need to not use that word anymore, but for me, it felt like a gift at the time. Had I been 60 and my kids had been in college and I had been, I mean, if they want to go to college or whatever, knock on wood, but if they had been there and I had been, working or home, that gets a lot less, not compassion from people, but people are like, oh, Brett, she's got old lady cancer. So, you know what I'm saying?
Right, it doesn't rock their world.
Right.
Yeah.
But there was something about me being 33 and having these little boys. And I think that moms specifically looked at me and thought like, that could be my life. And then dads looked at my husband and thought like, I don't know how he's doing it all, So I think,
which he was a real rock star. I will say. We should shout out to my mother-in-law and your husband.
Yeah. I mean, Adam, again, talking about him like being up with the babies in the middle of the night and being the person that's rocking them. And there's never been a moment of our marriage where he's not just as in it as I am. And it's been like my shit. Do you know what I mean? Like I always say, like, I'm the one who had the preemies and felt like I couldn't sustain them. Right. But he was like right there. And same with cancer, it's the exact same. And then it's the same in our household. I mean, I was writing a little bit about, our family or whatever. And I was thinking we have been like meal planners together since we got married. We figure out like, I mean, not like without fault, obviously, or weeks get busy or whatever, but we figure out like, well, what can I do this night or what can you do this night? And I think like that partnership has been huge for all of the things that I've gotten to thrive through. Has been partially because I have this great person to do it with and who has never, ever complained. I complain all the fucking time. He doesn't complain at all. He just steps up to the plate and does it. And so it's all these elements of my life that even when I got sick and got breast cancer, I was put in a very ideal position, right? Like, I know that sounds so stupid, but it felt so lucky to me that like I had all these friends and all this family that were there. And I had a great doctor who found it and said, we're going to make sure you get what you need. And then I had this great team of my oncologist and that whole team that just like rocked it. And that's all the things that had to go right? Because if you think about how many things could go wrong every day, especially in the human body, and the fact that all these things went right and I get to be here, like, I'm sorry I'm crying, but it's magic.
It is, actually. Sometimes if you think about it, it's amazing that any of us survived.
I have a whole thing. I wrote that whole thing about like I would have never survived the Oregon Trail. I mean, it's absolutely accurate.
Died of dysentery for sure.
Right? I mean, I would have died in childbirth. I would have died with like all these things where I'm like, I would not have survived. And yet I'm still sitting here. So I think like that just makes me want to celebrate every day, and not in like a Pinterest way. That's great too.
Sure.
But more in just like a finding the goodness of all the parts. I will tell you though, finding the goodness when my babies were screaming all the time, I couldn't do that. That was the hardest part.
For sure. Well, so a question I have is, so did having cancer or going through that, has that changed the way you feed yourself and or your family?
100%. The biggest question I will get is, so do you not eat sugar anymore? Are you a vegetarian? Are you vegan? What types of things have you cut out? My physician and my oncologist have both said, you are 39 years old. You now are 5 years post-treatment and you have to live your life. You get to live your life. So, cause for a while I said like, I don't know, should I not be like having any alcohol again or anything? And again, my oncologist was like, no, I think you might benefit from a glass of wine, like every once in a while, right? So the way that I feed myself, and I would say it goes along with the whole like intuitive eating that one of your guests did talk about intuitive eating as well. And I think with my sister-in-law, I've heard that phrase a lot, and it makes a lot of sense to me. And I now know more like what my body needs in order to have energy, for instance. I think Bill Esch talked about like food being fuel or calories being fuel. And I feel that every day. I mean, I'm definitely, I've been through a lot of surgeries. And so one of the things they tell you pre-surgery and then post-surgery is protein is like one of the most important things to getting your body and your skin to heal.
And I think women in particular, historically, not so good at adequate protein.
So. And because you think like, oh no, I'm doing okay. Like I had some lunch meat or whatever. Right. It's like figuring out the sources of protein I'm getting. I also feel like I joked that my mom, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and my mom like always made a homemade meals. She worked and my dad worked, but we ate at home almost every night. I lived in a tiny town. There was like not really any fast food. Yeah. But it was a lot of cream souped casseroles.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Which are delicious.
Delicious.
By the way. A cream of something.
Right. Always
it can be
good.
The base of something real good.
Everything good comes with the cream of something soup, right? But I would say that I'm very big at this point in my life and with my kids on not necessarily organic foods as much as knowing kind of where my food is coming from. So if it's beef, we buy a quarter cow from some friends because it makes sense. We know where the meat's coming from. We know kind of not necessarily like, again, how it was raised or whatever, but it's local. It's closer to us. If we think about the way that like cavemen had to eat, right? It was about what they could hunt and gather, not what they could have brought in on a ship. Right. So I think that has been one of my big things, just checking that. I definitely do buy a lot more organic, certain like fruits and things if I'm going to be eating them. Like a pear, I love like just a good pear.
Yeah.
So like anything I'm going to be eating with the peel on or something, I try to buy myself or my kids more organic or, locally sourced. And I think though on the flip side, like I have pizza rolls in my freezer for my kids, because the other part that I know is you can, as we kind of discussed earlier, you can stress your body out with not putting the right things in it, but you can also stress your brain out, which then stresses your body out if you're overthinking all of it. And so there are definitely, it's all about balance and moderation. Yeah. And, but I think with my kiddos, they are all different eaters. Each of them are picky in different ways. And so it's also not making a mountain out of a molehill at meals and not like ruining those times where we get to be together as a family.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing about a meal for me is really at this point, meals and holidays and everything are about that we're all together. And those times are so limited in terms of like the big scheme of life. And so when we sit down for a meal at the table, which we do almost every night as a family, even if for 5 minutes where we're all overlapping, but when we do that, it's important to me that we are able to like enjoy it, talk about the day, I don't know. We usually sit down, we say what we're thankful for, we do our prayer, and then we sing a prayer. So we're those people. And then the kids eat and we talk about it. But it's so much more about the atmosphere of the table than it is exactly what's on it that night.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've talked about that multiple times on the show.
Yes.
And I think that's right on, because all the benefits we talk about with family meals have to do with, like you said, that togetherness time, making it a joyful and pleasant experience, even more important than, if we're eating organic pears or Totino's pizza rolls.
Right.
So I love that. So then kind of as a adjacent question, you had mentioned, you've been through a lot. You've been through a lot of surgeries. did this experience, and it's hard, I mean, also you've just grown and aged, but does this change the way that you look at your own body, also the messaging that you give to your kids about the way that maybe they look at their bodies?
I think the first part of it is I try to remind my boys that, again, the body is miraculous. I mean, look how much you can do to it and it will still be there for you. Like, that's just crazy. I mean, if nobody has seen a picture of you 9 months pregnant.
Oof. I'll include that. I'll post
because
that. It's
again, but
people should see that.
Yes. Because also just to say, like, it doesn't, this isn't Hollywood. We don't all just like bounce back from pregnancy or whatever. It takes work and effort and honoring your body for what it is and what it can be and what you want it to be. And so I think, I mean, my most recent surgery, Kristen's aware, they actually opened up my stomach and harvested my stomach tissue and put it on my chest. And so now I have what I call stoobs. They're my stomach boobs. Maybe I should call them bummocks. I don't know. Because they're like up
Those
on.
are fun. Those sound like way more
right? Don't they?
Stoobies.
It's the Stooby show. But yeah, no, I mean, so the body is crazy. It is wild. Like so my boys have seen, I have a lot of scars. I have a lot of, they have seen it all. I mean, I have a picture of my littlest when he was like 2.5, and when they sent home like all the implants with me to look at.
Yeah.
I have a picture of him like playing with them on the kitchen counter. A lot of people would say like, that's inappropriate, or I can't believe that your kids have seen your boobs, or you talk about boobs so much. You talk about, you know, when I had C. diff and I would crap my pants all the time. But like, I want them to know that it, like, what really has happened, and then also to know that, again, it's miraculous and that we can all come back from wherever we are. Nothing really is that permanent. I mean, yes, I have scars that are there, but my relationship with my body, you know, when I was in high school, I dealt with disordered eating and body image issues, and all the way through, I'd say a little bit through college. And after having babies, I definitely felt more at peace with my body. But now I love my body. And that's not to say like I look in the mirror and I'm like, yeah, this is a rockin' bod, you know, or like, I'm probably going to get a modeling contract. It's weird. It has like nothing to do with how it looks, but how I feel about it. And how I feel about it is it's a miracle. And I think we all feel that way. We just don't recognize it every day.
Well, I feel like that's a really good segue to talk about the fact that in addition to all of these things, you also wrote a book.
I did write a book.
As you know, you do.
As one does.
And it's called Wear the Damn Swimsuit. And we'll include information on our Facebook page about how maybe you can score this free autographed copy of Wear the Damn Swimsuit. It is an incredible read. And I will say,
she's not biased at all, right?
No, it's fantastic. It's like, you'll not want to put it down. You'll be laughing. You'll be crying. You'll be wetting your pants. It's awesome. But I mean, I think that that's kind of along the same lines in terms of body acceptance, celebrating your body, hence the title, Wear the Damn Swimsuit. But can you talk to us a little bit about your motivation to write this book and why?
Totally. I mean, I'm going to cry again probably because I do when I talk about it. But each year post-cancer, you kind of have your cancerversary, which is the day that you kind of consider when you got diagnosed. And then you have your survivorship date is what I would call it. And so my survivorship date is the date of my bilateral mastectomy, because that is the date they would say that you were clinically either cleared or not cleared, right? So, or pathologically cleared. So in 2016, 3 days after my 34th birthday, I went in for my bilateral mastectomy. And at that point, they declared that they felt like there was only a microscopic amount of anything they could see. And so I was technically cancer-free is what my doctor calls it. Everybody has different verbiage. Some people call it NED, no evidence of disease. some people say like you're just not fighting active cancer, but I was cancer free. And so at that point then, I went through radiation after that, and then I had another couple of surgeries. But a year out, I decided that I was going to do something crazy every year on my survivorship date that was like facing a fear. Mm-hmm. And so I went skydiving, and it was awesome, and I recommend it to anybody, even if you have little kids. But if you like go splat, it's not on me. But then after the next year, I played my guitar and sang in public, and I am not a good...
Oh, you are?
No.
Yes.
No. Like truly, this is like the like top 10 songs that would be the easiest to learn if you Googled it. That's like what I did. But I wanted to do that to show my kids that if you love to do something, as an adult, you should still keep doing it. So I feel like sometimes as adults, we're like, that's cute. The kids have dreams or hobbies. Right. But like
yeah, the kids get to do everything. We talked about this too. Like, oh, you get to take guitar lessons and find your path and live your dreams.
Yes.
Well, are you ever really too old for that?
No.
I think that's exactly right. We're like, no, I'm gonna sign up for something.
Exactly.
I'm gonna learn something new.
Exactly.
But I think as adults, we're often afraid to be bad at things.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So that was the big thing, was saying, I know I can acknowledge that this is not like American Idol quality, because that's what kids see, right?
Yeah.
They see like people out that are phenomenal. Those are the people that are on TV or on Instagram or whatever doing the things.
Yeah.
And so it's saying like, no, you don't have to be fame worthy. You can still go do it.
Yeah.
So then the next year was the year that I decided I was going to write this book. And so that's what I did. And I've struggled a lot with writing over the years because, again, everybody's a writer nowadays.
Well,
and
really
so, no. But you can see, I mean, it's just like, it's still uncomfortable for me to even acknowledge that I'm not good at promoting the book or anything or whatever. But I did it because at the time I had the blog, but I had all these thoughts of what I felt like I had kind of learned through having cancer as a young mom and through motherhood. And I wanted it for my boys. Because in the first 4 years, I was on endocrine therapy still. So I got Lupron shots every month to suppress my ovaries. And then I would take a pill every day. And I'm just now done with that therapy and figuring out just how much that impacted my emotions and my mental state and everything. But I think I just always, the facing the fear was partially for me too, to say like, I've had cancer and I'm not going to back down from life. Like, I'm going to do the things that scare me. And I want my kids to see that it is scary for me to do these things. Mm-hmm. It is terrifying to put your words in a book because you can't
it's out there.
Take it back. Mm-hmm. And people are going to Google review you or whatever. And you have to say like, I feel I like doing this enough that I'm going to do it. And I want them to always know that they can shine their light, whatever that light is. I mean, hopefully it's not like, selling drugs, but like
if you're really good at it.
Right. Like, that's your thing. But like, I want them to know, like, doesn't matter what life throws at you, as long as you've got a heartbeat, like do the shit, do the things, and embrace it and wear the damn swimsuit. And I had written an article on my blog about a year out from my cancerversary, and it was this wear the damn swimsuit, and it was me talking about how I spent so much of my life hating my thighs and not wanting to get in the pool or the lake or wanting to be seen because I was embarrassed. And it's like, for what? What did I miss out on? I missed out on stuff because I was so worried about what my thighs rubbing together look like to somebody else. Nobody else gives a shit. I'm telling you.
They're all just worried about themselves.
Exactly. We are all very concerned about ourselves. And that should make us feel better. But I just think I just felt like I needed to write the book. And so I did it. And I say now, like, my oldest just started getting to read some of it. He's 12, and I'm slow with it because it's hard to relive some of it for all of them. And then also because it talks about boobs and poop. So, you know.
Which is really the recipe for a good book.
Right? Right? Boob, shit, baby spit, all the things.
Well, I love this. Well, thank you so much. And again, if you're not the lucky winner of this book, I highly recommend that you pick it up. It is a quick read because you won't want to put it down, but I feel like it's one that, I mean, it's a life changer. It'll change the way you think about things. So I highly recommend it. And I can't thank you enough for writing it and putting it out in the world for the rest of us.
Well, I feel the same about, honestly, do feel the same about you choosing to do the podcast. I think as women specifically, when we're in our child rearing years, we can be so focused on them that we forget that we have all this sort of knowledge to impart and share that somebody else might be able to take away. And that is where like the magic happens, is when we start to work as a community. And so I appreciate that you're willing to put this out there and be a resource for people and use all of your knowledge and then bring on people like the guests you've had. I mean, now me included, but no, like the guests you've had, and just help people feel like it's all okay.
Yeah,
you know?
Right? It took me a long time to even learn that, and I still have to remind myself of
right.
that.
And we're going to have to remind ourselves every day, right? It's like
every day.
It's like we're on 51st dates on Millerhood. I feel like just forget every day.
Well, thank you, Ashli, so much.
No, thank you very much.
So I'm going to move on to our next segment, the Ask Me Anything portion. So these will be a little change of gears. You know, it's November now, Thanksgiving month. So I have a couple of questions. Number one is from Maggie. What is your go-to holiday dish when you have to make something?
Okay, I love this question because I am a youngest child.
So you never have to do anything. Is that right? That's what every oldest child is like. Of course, Ashley doesn't have to bring anything.
Right. I hate telling people this. When I go to my in-laws, the last couple of years, I have made like a cranberry salad relish stuff, like from scratch.
Like the cranberry sauce?
Yes.
I honestly only like that kind that comes out shaped like the can.
I've never eaten that because I was so afraid of it as a kid.
It was part of our like school lunches. We would get this like cut circle of cranberries. And so now I'm like, why is this so chunky?
Like, you're like, is it cranberries? Is it beets? Is it cranberries? Is it beets?
So I'm all like, do you have the can one? Like just.
So I make one. It's just like cranberries, orange juice, orange zest, lime. It's super easy. You boil it all and then let it set up. And it was one of the first like non-bland, because it's kind of tart, foods that Jonah, my middle, would eat. And he's had a lot of like, I don't know, idiosyncrasies about food.
Sure.
He was a stuffer and he has some sensory stuff. So I think when I found that he would eat that, I was like, I will make that every year. So I do take that to my in-laws. My mom often makes it for our house. And then my parents still cook the whole meal, and Adam's parents still cook the whole meal. And otherwise, I always take the rolls.
I was going to say that too. I was like, I feel like when it comes to those group things, my two routes are number one, can I bring the rolls, which will just be from the grocery store?
Absolutely. Yes.
Or a pie, also from
Costco.
Somewhere. Yeah. Or if I'm really going to make something, it's mostly just something I know I will love, like Brussels sprouts.
Oh, right.
That I think maybe wouldn't have made it onto the menu otherwise. So it's all like very self-serving, like very easy, or like, this is what I want to eat.
Do you eat anything really, does your family either of your families do anything really interesting?
So I would say, so here's our other confession, is that my actual like nuclear family, we are not enormous fans of the Thanksgiving meal. Like I feel like I did brine a turkey the other year, which was, I thought was a big deal. I bought some kit though and bagged it, and I thought really fancy. But I just think it's a little, I feel like I'm going to get hate for this, but I feel like the Thanksgiving meal is a little overrated. It's like the most beige kind of bland meal there is. So this is
I don't disagree. I mean, usually if you look at the plate, it's like stuffing,
beige.
brown,
I mean, it's fine.
turkey,
it's like white, mashed potatoes, stuffing,
yes,
turkey, gravy, rolls, you know. and then maybe the Brussels sprouts if I was feisty, which is fun. I mean, whatever. There is some nostalgia, I think, to that.
Sure.
But I would say, so the other thing, and this is like total confession and maybe even circles back to something we talked about earlier about accepting help, is I love to cook. But I actually, going back to like the holidays being about togetherness and just hanging out, that we are actually we're going to be out of town for Thanksgiving. And we've kind of done that more frequently for the holidays. We'll just kind of skip town. And I found a lady that will like make you a meal the day before that you basically just have to heat up.
Oh, that's amazing.
Right? And so then we were also able to, she made all kinds of fun things like brisket and chili mac and cheese. And I was like, oh, like things I wouldn't even have thought of. And so that is not traditional, and it definitely, isn't and I think it's fun too. On the flip side, had the whole family where you spend the whole day together cutting, and that's fun too because it's that togetherness. But knowing my family at this stage, that's probably not how my kids would want to spend the whole day. So
that's the other thing. It's like I'm always amazed by how much time it takes, and then everybody eats in like 4 minutes.
Yeah.
If the kids are all like, I want to go, now they're at the age where they want to spread out and go do what they want to do, and the cousins are all around. So it's like, so you've cooked for 84 hours and we're all going to taste it and then unbutton our pants and then
that's it.
Yeah. Everybody takes a nap.
Totally. So, and I mean, I think that leaves the like option if we want to make something ourselves and add to it.
Yeah.
So I can just go with the vibe. But I think that just goes to, I know that a previous version of myself would have kind of thought that like, I shouldn't be doing that.
Again, though, like what becomes like our thing at our table is what our family does, like, so I think that's great. We also want to change our habits over the years so that our kids feel like they want to be there.
Totally.
They want to hang out with us.
And I just love it because I think, I'm not going to then, it's not going to be a stressful experience for me at all. And I can just spend the day hanging out with my family.
Yes.
So.
And then the day after, we always do chili because if there's like Nebraska plays Iowa usually. So
yeah. No, I don't have any particular day after, but.
Oh yeah, you have like the sandwich with the moist maker or whatever, like Seinfeld or something.
Quote that. That's right. All right, second question from Sheila. What are you most grateful for this year?
Oh my gosh. That is really hard. I would say this year I'm most grateful for, pretty commonly most thankful for my health, the health of my family, and that my husband and I both still have, I hate saying it that way, but we both still have each have our parents.
Totally.
And siblings, and we're not in the age yet where we're taking care of our parents or things like that. I think so. Yeah, health and access to food. I heard recently, not to again, like I don't want to make this like so it doesn't age well or whatever they say about a podcast or something, but I think I heard on the radio that this should be the most expensive Thanksgiving ever because just the rising
like
cost
inflation,
of food.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so just, I'm most thankful that for us that we have access to food and being able to have those meals around the table. But I think you make such a good point about like doing different, not necessarily having to have the turkey and everything, because really you just hope that families will be able to gather together.
Totally. Well, and that I think, never in our lives have we probably been so grateful for just that.
Accurate.
Right? I mean, the last couple of years have taught us to not take that for granted.
Right.
I don't think that would have occurred to me ever
Yeah.
before.
I do say sometimes I feel like cancer was a good like precursor to COVID because I was like,
how to stay inside,
whatever.
And stay away from
my
people.
life's already been shut down. I've already had the like stop sign, and you can't go yet. But yeah, I think just I'm mostly grateful to get to be here and get to experience it all. So
I was thinking about that, and this year I would say I think it sounds a little strange, but I feel like this year and even as a family, we kind of really, prioritized our mental health. There was no huge cause for that, except for, I think, just recognizing that as something that you can specifically focus on. And at least for me personally, I think that what came from that was just an element of mindfulness that I didn't even realize I didn't have until I started to have it. And I know some of it's just, my kids are older, and I think when your kids are small and you're working and you're just always go, go, go. And I was never in the moment.
Right.
I was always to-do list. I was always, what's the next, anticipating there's no downtime. If I have downtime, I need to just work towards the next thing that needs to be done. And I mean, to give myself some grace for that, somebody always needed something, right?
And you were also in residency and then being a pediatrician, and your husband was also in residency. I think about it.
I'm not
like,
blaming myself.
You guys are a little bit of rock stars over there,
but at the same time, it's like, you kind of like, once you get that chance, you start to realize like, this is actually all there is. All there is are these moments. And if I'm missing them, that's it. I'm going to get to die and just, be in the middle of my to-do list. It's not the life I want to live. So I think for me, that was the biggest thing I was grateful for. And then I think once you start being able to focus on that as a parent, you start to be able to focus on harvesting that in your kids or prioritizing that in your kids. And when you look back, you're like, oh, I wish I had felt like this sooner. But at the same time, I'm just grateful to say, like, I'm so thankful to have this perspective right now, which of course is something that's forever a developing and growing experience. And then to hopefully be able to assist my kids in discovering that or kind of just honing those skills earlier than I did.
Yeah, no, I think also the willingness, again, sometimes people can look at any person and think like, well, that person has it all together. And even in a time where I think we're more aware of the fact that we do that, and some people are saying don't do that. But I think it's great for you to acknowledge and open up the conversation about mental health and to say, like, again, mental health doesn't mean I looked at myself and said I was crazy and needed to go get medicine. It means like so many different things. And so understanding what impact that has and how that's changed your life for the better, that's a huge, that's a really good message to share, I think.
Well, I think in just reducing the stigma about it, if that's the one thing I can pass on to my kids, is it's like, this is useful for every single human being. There's nobody that doesn't suffer with, maybe you're not fitting a diagnosis of some sort, but we all have struggles and anxieties and all these things. And the worst thing you can do is make it not okay to address it and take care of it.
I was talking to somebody because this surgery that I just had, I'm on a restriction right now where I can't use my core for 8 months. And so I can basically walk. That's like the only thing exercise I can do. So before, my favorite type of exercise is yoga. It's my very favorite. And that's one of them that's pretty much off the table right now. But it's interesting because I was talking with my therapist about this, and she's like, well, you can still, like, meditation is going to be just as good for your body, not just like for your whole body, as like doing yoga, right? So taking that out of it and knowing that even if physically you're limited in doing things, you can still find the ways to get right with it. Oh. And so I thought that was like a good reminder too, because I think we look at somebody else and we think like they're out there doing CrossFit every day or whatever, and I can't do that. Like a new mom, I can't do that. I don't have time to do that. How am I going to do that? Well, no, but you can find honestly, you truly with podcasts and all the things on YouTube that you can find now, you could find like 2 minutes for mindfulness a day, and you might be well served to figure out if that's helpful. Absolutely. So.
Well, thank you so much, Ashli. This has
Thank
been
you.
an absolute pleasure.
I loved it. Loved every second. It's probably more seconds than it needed to be for you, but I loved it all.
No, likewise.
I loved it all.
And thank you for joining us on another episode of Feeding the Family. We hope that you'll hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any episodes, and we'll see you next Monday.